amount of personal things people do online at the office. And whenever I see that, I think that boss should just shut his mouth and be quiet. Because we see that for every hour an employee spends at the office doing personal things, they spend 3 hours at home doing work related to the job. The employer's making out like bandits. We are working harder than we ever have before. So what we're seeing with enough already is people are saying, I want to train people that I'm not going to update my Facebook page twice a day, that they're not going to get an answer to an email necessarily within 15 minutes. And I have friends that if I don't respond within 15 minutes, they're coming back and saying, why haven't you responded to me? We're trying to train people to understand we want balance in our lives. And that balance is not just with things like Facebook and with email, it's also with devices. I counted on this trip, I have 8 charger cables with me. I have 8 devices between my phone, my camera, my video camera, my Bluetooth earpiece, my iPad, my Kindle, my toothbrush. It's pretty silly. The worst example of this, or the best example, depending on your perspective, one of my good friends sent his daughter, his 14-year-old daughter, to London last December on a school trip. 3 girls to a hotel room. Since it was a school trip, it was an old, inexpensive hotel, there was 1 electrical outlet in the room. 3 girls, 3 cameras, 2 computers, 2 iPads, 1 iPod, 3 hair dryers. They were, if you know the old English novel, it was like Lord of the Flies in there. They were fighting with each other. They actually had to set the alarm and get up every 90 minutes to take things out of the plugs. And some of the girls were screaming, you can't take it out, it's not fully charged. Because some of those things take all night to fully charge. There's nothing more devastating than having an electrical device whose battery is dead. But we have become so dependent. There's so much of this. There does seem to be this development, at least, of standardizing some of the cables, once again with the exception of the stubbornness of Steve Jobs, who refuses to participate in anything that would involve cooperation. But nonetheless, we are trying to find balance in our lives with all of this technology. And then the last trend, and I think the most important of all, it's the newest, is mobile. I used to say everything will move to mobile. That came faster than we thought. The trend really is mobile is everything. 11 years ago, when we started tracking the internet, everybody accessed through a PC. And off to the side, 2001, 2002, we started to see this little thing, the little mobile internet. Sort of a subsidiary or an ancillary or a side part of the internet. Well, in the blink of an eye, the mobile internet is becoming far more important than the regular internet. When India, to go back to their 15% internet penetration, as it climbs to 30 or 40%, it is not going to be with PCs on the desk. It is going to be through mobile smartphones, which are already, not smartphones, but mobile phones now are already in the hands of over 5 billion people. If you believe Hans Vesper, the CEO of Ericsson, the company that has built most of the mobile infrastructure, there will be 1 mobile phone for each person on the planet by 2015. We're seeing whole parts of the world where a wired infrastructure is never going to be built. And that's good news for those parts of the world because it wouldn't have been built for another 30 or 40 years. And you're seeing the use of mobile phones transforming agriculture in Africa and changing the most remote parts of the world. But the mobile internet is the internet that the world is going to engage with. If you want one anecdotal example, not science, but it's something I've noticed, I've watched that people almost never lose their mobile phones. They can be stolen. You can drop them in the street and they can break. But the reason we almost never lose our mobile phones is that if you leave your phone on the chair here in this room or on the table in a restaurant, most of us can't get more than 5 or 10 meters from them before we're reaching for them, accessing them. We use them so often we can't get far enough away from them to lose them. Whereas if I leave a credit card on a table in a restaurant, it may take me 3 days to notice my credit card is gone, and then I have to retrace my steps. These are things I said that there's practically not a moment of a teenager's life that they're not in front of one, and those of us who use them, we access them, people have stopped count, sometimes at 200 times a day. The only time I ever saw somebody lose a mobile phone was a friend who was getting out of a cab, who was on the seat of the cab, he was paying the driver and shut the door, and he did realize 3 seconds later his phone was gone, but the cab had already gone down the street. That's about the only way you can lose them. They are so connected to almost everything we do with our lives. And of course that is only accelerating. I'm sure, David, you're going to talk about how we use them in the purchasing process. And they truly are, we've heard about this for years, but they truly are replacing wallets. Because what are wallets other than cash, credit cards, photos? And now people don't carry photos in their wallets anymore. You've got the best photo album in the world with your mobile phone, your credit cards. In America, we're having a hard time using our credit cards in parts of Europe because our credit cards don't have chips and pins, and our credit card companies don't want to spend billions of dollars to create all that equipment because they know that the whole credit card's moving into the mobile phone within a matter of a handful of years. And cash, we're never going to get rid of cash, but I think my guess is most Russians probably don't need to carry around more than 500 rubles, maybe 200 rubles, and the rest you do through credit cards and other things. So smartphones are becoming absolutely the center of our lives. That's a little bit of the work we do. Anyone who's interested in our work, be happy to give you a card. You're welcome to go to our website, look at our reports. You have been an absolutely wonderful audience. And Anton, are you going to take some questions if there are?
Thank you, David. Jeffrey, thank you very much. Questions? 5-minute session for questions. Of course.
Jeff, you talk a lot about kids
Yes.
and the changing trends in kids. Can you talk a little bit more about sort of older adults and the changing technologies with older adults? Because my own experience with my mother, who I gave an iPad to, she didn't want it, she didn't want it, she didn't want it. I gave it to her, and then 2 weeks later she sent me an email saying you have to pry it from my cold, dead hands. So it's the accessibility, etc.
Well, first, we spend a lot of time looking at teenagers because we try to figure out which things do teenagers do because they're young and have time that they will abandon as pesky things like jobs, spouses, and children get in the way, and which things do they do their transformation. We work with, some of you may be familiar with AARP, an association of 40 million retired Americans. And when we started working with them, we started cutting our data for people over the age of 50 and 60 and 70. And what we found was fascinating. We found that older people, and by older I mean now in their 70s, are only different, those who are older who are connected, are only different from teenagers in 2 ways. One is the way they use their phones. Your mother, and I'm stereotyping her as an older person, but she may be, but your mother probably has a mobile phone and probably uses it only for voice. She's probably not doing a lot of texting. It's probably a voice phone. That's one way that older people are different. The other way older people are different who use the web, they use it as much or more for information, but they use it much less for entertainment. They use it for information about entertainment, to find out what time a movie starts. But your mother probably is not consuming a lot of television or a lot of media on her device, unless she's an exception. As far as the iPad is the best device for older people that has ever come along, because what's the learning curve on an iPad? 5 minutes? 6 minutes? Whereas the learning curve on a PC, probably 5 hours, 2, 3, 4 hours before you're using it, and then it's constant instruction, and then when things go wrong, so it's an amazing device for older people because of its simplicity, because of its navigation, everything about it. And I think what your mother's experiencing is going to be true for much of her generation. And with AARP, we see that in America, 30% of people over the age of 60 are still not connected, and they were probably never going to get PCs, but they may now get iPads. Any other questions?
A bit provocative question crossed my mind when I heard both presentations. So actually, maybe Scott, you can contribute to the answer as well. So actually, the digital world allows us to create hyper realities, right? With which we can manipulate with mass conscience and so on. And actually, I think that all agree that we work in a bit cynical industry, right? And as for digital, we casually use agents of influence and so on. So, what do you think? Should we play further ping pong, or not?
I think I'm going to sort of ask a slightly different way of Scott, so I'm going to pick up on the slightly different way you asked of Scott as well. You're right as far as you becoming agents of influence, but the truth is you're now dealing with consumers and customers who are more empowered than they have ever been in their